A week or so ago, a couple weeks ago, I guess it was now, Sheila was asked by somebody in a small group that we're part of about her thoughts toward being here, and she said, it's really great. She enjoys singing every week, appreciates the fact that Jolie lets her be in the worship team, and just enjoys meeting you all, and it really is sort of a vacation, a little getaway for us every weekend, so we spend more time in this 24 hours that we're gone from home than we do all week together, probably, just the two of us. So incredibly, I don't understand that fully, but she enjoys that too. So anyhow, but it is a joy to be here. But we understand, and we are thrilled with the news that AJ gave us this morning, because we understand that our role is temporary and transitional. And so after Easter a little bit, we'll start talking a little bit more about transition. You'll hear that word quite a bit and some stuff like that. But I know that if I'm here too long, that's not good for you all. And so while we enjoy it, we are also really eager to have the right person in place here and for our ministry to end and move on to different things. So that's a really powerful thing. And really do be in prayer. And I just can't urge you enough, whenever they announce those 2 Sundays, the Sunday that they'll be here and the following Sunday, those are priority Sundays for you as people of this church to be here, even if you have to rearrange schedules a little bit, because that's really, you're all part of God's voice in this. And they want to know that they have a strong support from the church. It's I've said this poorly, I think, in the first service, but the job of a pastor is a big job. It's no bigger than many of yours. You have people that depend on you and the business you lead or the class you teach or whatever. That's a great responsibility. But being sort of the leader of the church, the people of God, is a huge responsibility. And to know that a good portion of those are behind you and agreeing with you and on board with you, that's a huge encouragement to a new pastor that comes to a place. So I just wanted to share that's really important, and sort of just lend my appreciation for all the work the committee's done, but also my voice of just encouragement. Keep praying. The process isn't over yet, and just because 9 people said, let's go forward, they're really looking for affirmation from all of you too. So that's really an important thing. So the last few weeks we've been talking about really what God's provided, the fact that God is Jehovah Jireh, and He's the provider. And so we finished that last week, and it was I've been thinking about where do we go from there? And I thought, well, it's Lent, it's Easter coming up. So the key thing about Easter is the person, right? It's not necessarily the celebration or the Easter bunny or the or eggs or any of those other things, pretty flowers, spring. Those are all nice. But really, the focus of Easter is the person that we celebrate and the event that we celebrate. And so I thought, coming onto Easter, we should look a little bit more closely at who is this person that we celebrate. The Scripture has many phrases that begin with "I am." Jesus says many times, "I am." And you can go in any concordance and read many of those "I ams." And so this morning we're going to begin thinking about the person of Jesus in terms of the "I am" statements. And just a few of them. We're going to talk this morning about "I am who I am," and we'll talk about that in a minute. And then we're going to talk next week about "I am the light of the world," and what that means and how that's practical in our lives. And then one that's really not often thought of in this "I am" statements, but Jesus said on a couple occasions, "I am willing." And on Palm Sunday, we're going to talk about the fact that He was willing to go through the next week and so forth. And then, of course, on Easter, "I am the resurrection and the life," and even maybe have another one or two in my head for after that, depending when the candidate can come. So didn't want to get too far ahead of myself in that, but that's sort of the next 4 weeks, is thinking about the person of Jesus and who He is in terms of the "I am" statements. And so this morning we want to start by, I got to turn this on. We want to start by talking a little bit about I am who I am. And really when I began to think about that, I began to think about the fact that he's making a statement when he says, I am who I am. He's making a statement about he's the unchanging God. And of course, that led me to think about change a little bit and how many of us sort of struggle with change from time to time. Although, if I were to ask you if you like change, some of you would say, oh yeah, I love change some of the time. And what I hear from that is, I like change when I can be the master of that change, right? I like change, so let's rearrange my living room so I can move the pictures around a little bit. And, usually that's not the husband that's saying that, at least at our house. But we like that change because it's something we chose to do, right? But when change just sort of happens to us or is forced on us, most of us say, whoa, I'm not so sure about that. And there's probably lots of good reasons for that. But really, it's sort of because we lack security when that happens. The problem that we have is that we're resistant to change sometimes, but we're living in an ever-changing world. This is not one of my brighter moments in ministry history, but when I went to move to Midland, when Sheila and I moved to Midland many years ago, and I was pastor of a very small church, and matter of fact, we were so small that we closed off the sanctuary and met in the foyer area because it was big enough for all of us. And eventually we grew just a little bit bigger than that and started to grow a bit. And actually it was on Easter Sunday we got to move into the sanctuary and sort of fill the sanctuary. That was a big, big day for us. And shortly after that I thought, well, we still don't fill the sanctuary very well. So in order to have cohesiveness when we sing together, it sounds better if we're closer and so forth, I'll rope off the back half of the church. And so I did that. Didn't really ask anybody. I just did it. And I didn't think it was a big deal, right? I was the master of that change, right? So of course it made sense to me. But at that time, we had chairs up front, sort of like this one. And so I'd get up in my suit and tie and sit there and stare at y'all. And you'd stare at me back until it was time for this to happen, right? And so I observed this happening. An older man from our congregation, a great fella, came into church that day and walked down the far aisle and looked at the rope and turned around and walked out. I thought, oh my word, what's with Noah? So Monday morning, I ran out to Noah's house and said, Noah. I'd greet him and we'd chatted a little bit first. I said, Noah, tell me about yesterday morning. Oh, Pastor, I'll be back. Don't worry. He said, my whole world is changing. And some of the kids came to watch Mama that day. I need to have Mama sit her if I leave the house for very long. And I thought, good. I'll go to church. Nothing changes there. That's where I'll find my security. So I walked into church, and I couldn't sit where I was used to sitting. He said, it just struck me that day that there is no security in this world. It just struck me that everything is changing, and my world is changing so fast I hardly know how to deal with it, and I couldn't sit where I wanted to sit, so I left. I'll be back. I said, Noah, move the rope next time and sit wherever you want. It was okay. But I thought, I learned something really important, not necessarily not to put the ropes up, but the fact that in this world that's ever changing, sometimes we just need to roll back and say, what doesn't change? What can I count on? Where can I find my security? You know that I deal with people with disabilities and enjoy my work with that a great deal, and have learned a great deal. And every year I go to a conference. It's actually coming up this week, and I'm looking forward to it in Frankenmuth. And a few years back, I heard a speaker. He was a young man, just graduated from high school, heading off to college, and he was a young man with autism. And his topic, and this was fascinating, I thought, since I'm not a teacher, but his topic was really how you, as a teacher, can help me as a person with autism learn in your classroom. And he had about 5 really cool things. And one of them was that you can help me with change. And he said, one day I left class and my classroom looked a lot like this. All the chairs were in a row, and everything was neat and orderly. I knew where my stuff was, and I knew where my desk was, and I had my stuff in my desk, and it was neat and orderly. I knew where it was. He said, I came back the next day, and my classroom looked like this, and I didn't know where my desk was, and I didn't know what to do, and I didn't know who had messed with my stuff or where it was, and it took me 3 days to figure out that all my stuff was there, and that really I could deal with this. But it took me 3 days to figure that out. He said, if you just would have let me be involved with the change. What was he saying? He's saying, I need to be the master of my world. I need to be the master of my change, or else I don't feel secure. He said, if you would have just helped me with my change. And then he did say, this teacher, he talked to her eventually, and when she decided to change the room back, she said, hey, Bill, today after school, I'm going to change the room around. Do you want to stay here and help me with that? He said, the next day I came in, and I knew what to expect. I knew where my desk would be. I knew where my stuff was. And I knew nobody but me had messed with my stuff. He said, that was much better. I thought, wow, that's the point. Sometimes we just need that security of thinking about something that's not changing, an anchor to hold on to, a rock that we can shelter behind. As I was looking through my notes, I discovered a sermon from a number of years back, and one of the titles options I had for that was A Rock and an Island, from that song back in my day. I am a rock, I am an island, you know that one? And I know half of you say, what? But anyhow, the other half, you're going like this. That's good. But at the end of that song, it says, and it's a love song about a wounded lover, essentially. And he said, I'm a rock. I'm going to fortify myself so no one can hurt me again. I'm an island. I'm going to isolate myself so that I don't need to deal with people and change won't happen and all that kind of stuff. I won't be hurt again. It's really, when you stop to think about it, and as a kid I never really stopped to think about it, but when you stop to think about it, it's really a sad song because it's talking about there's so much change in the world and I want to protect myself, so I'm going to wall myself off from people. I'm going to isolate myself, which is the opposite of what we need. We need one another. We need relationship. We need people. Some of us need lots of people. Some of us need just a few people. But we need people. We need relationship. And yet we need that stability. Where do we find that something, that rock to hold on to that doesn't change, that gives us stability in life? Well, Jesus' answer to that was the I am. I am who I am, he said to Moses. How do we find stability in an ever-changing world? We find the one who's self-existent and self-sufficient and therefore unchanging. He's our rock. He's our security. He's our safety net. And that's the point of this morning. If you miss everything else I say, remember that Jesus, I am who I am, is the unchanging one. And that gives us a basis, a rock, a foundation in which to build. In Exodus chapter 3, verses 1 through 15, we have the story of Moses coming to the burning bush. You're probably pretty familiar. That's a Sunday school story, so most of us probably have heard that a few times. If not, it's a great story. We're not going to read the whole thing today. Go home and read the whole thing. It's a great story about how God works in someone's life. And you know that Moses had done what he'd done in Egypt, and he'd sort of got run out of town, fearful for his life. And so he'd gone to Midian, and he was a shepherd now, a lowly shepherd. Shepherds in the Bible days were the lowest of low people. Moses was glad to be that. He'd been sort of on top of the rung and didn't like that very well, and couldn't quite identify with the Israelites or with the Egyptians, because he was part of both worlds a little bit. And so he'd run on. He left town, and he had become a shepherd in Midian. And now he one day he wakes up and he goes out to tend his sheep, and here's this bush started on fire and it's not burning. That shocked him a little bit. And then a voice out of the bush said, "Moses, take off your sandals. You're standing on holy ground." I mean, that would unnerve most of us, wouldn't it? The bush on fire talks to us. Well, the Lord said to him that day, I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. Think about the people in Egypt for a moment. Why were they there? They were there because Joseph, a long time before this, had provided so well for Egypt that he was invited to invite his whole family down. And so the whole family came and set up camp and became part of Egypt. They were really separate, but they were within the land of Egypt. They were very loyal to their own language, their own customs, their own people. And they grew because they were a favored people. Pharaoh had always said, let them alone. Give them what they need. Help them grow. And then pretty soon, Joseph died, and that Pharaoh died, and a few more generations of Pharaohs came and went. And now they've grown into big people. And things are changing. There's nothing the same anymore for the Israelites. Now they're the enemy. Now they're feared by the Pharaoh because they're so large, and still loyal to each other. If they turn against the Pharaoh, he has no option, so he's going to keep them under his thumb and makes them become slaves and works them very, very hard. And the more they complain, the more work they have to do. I've seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I've heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I'm concerned about their suffering. So I've come down to rescue them from the hand of the Egyptians and to bring them up out of that land into a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey, the home of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites, and the Mennonites. No, I'm one of them. So we just get rolling there, Sorry about that. But think about what God just said there. You're going to come to this great land that's really rich and a wonderful land, and it's going to be your land. And oh, by the way, it's already the home of some other folks that you're going to have to drive out. Moses said, wow, this is a task. Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? God said, Moses said further, suppose I go to the Israelites and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you. And they ask, what is his name? Then what shall I tell them? God said to Moses, I am who I am. This is what you are to say to the Israelites. I am has sent you. Or has sent me to you. God also said to Moses, say to the Israelites, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, has sent me to you. Then I love this little last part. This is my name forever, the name you shall call me from generation to generation. God's saying, this is my name. I am who I am, and nothing's going to change that. Nothing's going to change me. You can call me that from generation to generation. And oh, by the way, you've been calling me that since the days of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, which were a long time ago. I am who I am. I'm the unchanging one. I'm the rock. I'm the security. I'm the foundation on which you can build. The question really is sort of who or what. And to us, that doesn't seem like a very big question. But in fact, to them, it was quite a question. You see, Moses asked two very different questions when he said, who am I and what's your name? When he asked, who am I, he was saying, so what's my identity? What's my pedigree? What's my ancestry? Who am I? I'm Moses. I'm not Jew, I'm not Egyptian. Neither one of them claim me. Neither one of them like me very well because I'm neither one, but I'm part of both. Who am I? I'm a shepherd, the low of the low in our society. How can I raise up and talk to them? If you read this whole story, you find out that Moses says to God, I'm not very good at talking. And I always think, Moses, you did a pretty good job of trying to talk yourself out of this one, didn't you? I mean, he's pretty eloquent here. He said, who am I? I'm really no one that they're going to listen to. Then he said, what is your name? See, it's a real different question. Now I'm not asking about identity, who? I'm asking about character, what? You see, those two words in the Hebrew language are really, really similar. I don't know how much you know about Hebrew, and I don't know very much about it, but after a number of years of studying, I still don't know much about it. But in Hebrew, the original Hebrew was not written with any vowels. It was just consonants. And we think that's really odd. How could you ever understand what to say? Have you ever had that little test, though, where lots of the vowels are removed, and the first and last letter are always right, but in the middle, there's letters missing, and you can read it just like that. It's real easy because that's how we read, right? We don't look at every letter necessarily, except on spelling tests and things like that. I tried to convince my spelling teacher that wasn't necessary because, after all, you never look at all those letters. She just never believed me on that one. But I'm thankful for Spell Checker today. So, but anyhow, that was all free, wasn't planned. But anyhow, the Hebrew language has these consonants all put together, and so the consonant for who is M, mem, and the consonant for what is mem, the M. Looks like a backwards D, sort of. And so someone went through, called the Masoretes, went through and they, what we call, pointed the text. They put little dots and other little squiggly lines and some things like that in the Hebrew text so that we could identify, a word like ma from a word like me. The word ma is the what? The word me is the word who. So they look really, really similar, but they really ask really, really different questions. What's your identity? What's your family? You see, if I come and I say, I'm Walter's son, you say, who? Why do I care? You don't, frankly. He was a pretty good guy, and he was my dad, but in an Archbold, maybe you might have cared. But here, not likely. I'm Geisel. Well, that doesn't mean much to me. I'm not Bontrager or Miller or Yoder or Kaufman. See, those are the names that ring bells here. Who am I? You know, sometimes the identity is less important than the authority. And I don't get my authority from me. I get it from God, the great I am, right? We've talked a lot this morning about the great I am. That's what he was asking. Where does my authority come from? What is your name? Name, character. What is your name? What is my authority? And Jesus, so God answered him by saying, I am who I am. I'm the great I am. Tell them, I am has sent you. I am who I am. This is what you are to say to the Israelites. I am has sent you. And then again, this is my name forever. It's the one that you can build on. It's the security in your ever-changing world. And their world was just as changing as our world. Sometimes we think, I don't know, really. Used to be that when I said I lived in the U.S., that made me feel a little bit powerful. That gave me a little security because nobody in the world attacks us on our own soil. How many of you feel that way today? You haven't listened to the news. You haven't heard of ISIS. You haven't, if you feel like, boy, this is a great land and we're really secure because we live here. That's part of the changing world that we live in. Where is my security? Where is my protection? Where is truth? What is truth? Every day somebody tells me what I thought was true wasn't true. I used to think if I ate certain things, I'd be cancer-free and heart-free and all that kind of stuff. And then I learned, no, that now causes cancer and this causes heart disease. I'm pretty sure that if I don't eat anything and don't drink anything, I'm not going to die of cancer or heart disease. That's all I'm pretty sure of. Where does my security come from? It comes from the fact that I am has sent me. That I trust and live and serve a rock of a God who doesn't change. Malachi 3:6, I am the Lord, and I do not change. And you think if this is just Old Testament stuff, then we should read it from the New Testament. Jesus Christ, the same yesterday, today, and forever. Hebrews. Truth is, I could have come up with another 10 of these verses in Scripture that just talk about the fact that I am who I am, and I'm not changing because I don't need to change. And the reason he doesn't need to change is because God already has the two characteristics that are required if you're going to be an unchangeable God. Two things. He's self-existent. And the second thing, he's self-sufficient. You see, when he's self-existent, nobody's created him. There's nobody greater than him. We are all created beings. There's someone who made us. There's someone who's greater than the created thing. I know that we have computers and we have really powerful machines and we have lots of things like that. But somebody created those things. There's somebody who's greater than the machines. I'm pretty sure it's not me usually. But there's somebody who knows that machine and knows how to fix it or break it or change it. There's somebody that can impose its will on those things that are greater and bigger than me because they're the maker of those things. You see, God, there is no one greater than God because he's self-existent. Even when I say that, I don't fully comprehend it because I can't understand something that never began and will never end. It's out of my realm of thinking because I'm finite and everything has to have a beginning and everything has to have an ending. If it began way back, I'll buy that. And if it's going to end way out in the future, that's okay with me. It still has a beginning point and an ending point. God is self-existent. He has no beginning, he has no ending. He just exists by his own power. You see, when you exist by your own power, there's nothing that can work, there's no outside force that can work on you that requires you to change. So you can become the unchanging one. When you're self-sufficient, the same is true. You need no one else. Someone has written, a commentator wrote, God does not need us or the rest of creation for anything. Yet, we and the rest of creation glorify him and bring him joy. That first statement does not indicate whether he desires a relationship with us. He wants that relationship. But quite frankly, as cool as you are, as neat as you are, as talented as you are, you bring nothing to God that he needs. He brings tons of stuff that we need. But he's self-sufficient. I hear lots and lots of people, I'm getting at an age where we begin to talk about, our kids taking care of us and stuff like that. And I hear lots and lots of people saying, I want to be able to be sufficient when I'm old. I don't want to be a burden to anybody. And that's a common thought for all of us. Truthfully, all our lives we're a burden to somebody because we need other people. We cannot exist all on our own. We need relationships. We have 3 children. The first and the last didn't need lots of relationships. They had a few good friends, and they were happy. The middle son, not so much. The more friends, the better off he was, he thought. And if there were nobody around right then, he'd call somebody and find them. And that's just sort of his nature. Still is his nature, sort of. They run a farm out in the West Coast, and so he invites all his friends. He says, come out for a barbecue. Come like 10 in the morning. You can help us farm, and then we'll barbecue. And they do it. I understand it. Free labor. And they seem to enjoy it. But that's just his nature. He needs lots of people, so he's constantly inviting people. Come out, come out, come out. God doesn't need us. He's self-sufficient. So he can say, I'm the one who doesn't change. I'm the self-sufficient one. We ask, so what? Okay, it's nice to know that God is, I am who I am, and he's self-existent, and he's self-sufficient. He's never changing, but what does that mean to me? Why do I care about that? Well, it's the reason that we can say he's a perfect God. He is who he is. He's complete. He's perfect. Gene mentioned several times God is able. He is able. I thought about putting all the things that God was able to do, and then I thought, well, he's just able to do whatever I need to do. Remember this song, this chorus from way back in the church? He is able, more than able, to accomplish what concerns me today. He is able, more than able, to handle anything that comes my way. He is able, more than able, to do much more than I could ever dream. He is able, more than able, to make me what he wants me to be. Read the end of Ephesians 3 if you want the biblical basis for that. When it says, my God is able to do more than you can ask or imagine according to the power that's at work within him. He is able. What's your need today? What's the area of your concern? We all have those. I have those. God's able to meet that need because he is the one who never changes. He's the rock. He's the strong one. Because he's unchanging, he's absolutely true. True is something that lines up perfectly. If a wall is true, it's perfectly straight. He's the one that lines up perfectly because he is the complete one. Boils down to this. There's an unwavering peace today when an uncertain tomorrow is trusted to an unchanging God. Whoever wrote that said it much better probably than I ever have. But that's really the point of today. Because I am who I am, God says, I can give you peace. Even though your circumstances are all over the place and your world is ever changing, I can be your stability if you trust me with your struggles. Lord Jesus, thank you for being the great I am. I am who I am. Jehovah, I am. Yahweh, I am. Thank you for being that person. And Lord, today we just come to you and lay our lives before you saying we need you. We need your rock. We need your foundation in which to build our lives. Forgive us where we failed in that and help us as we go ahead to continue to build those. We love you, Lord Jesus, and thank you that you are I am. Amen.